A lot of our RNTers at the moment are in investment phase. So they've got into this, they've got into the shape of their life, they've consolidated well, and now they're in the investment phase, learning how to stay there, rewiring their behavior, mindset, and identity, and building some muscle if that's their goal. And one of the big things that we always get asked is, will I now eat a lot of food given that I'm in investment phase? I think the answer to this question always surprises people, and it always ends up being a bit of a humbler. So let's discuss when you may eat a lot of food, and when, for the most part, it probably isn't going to be as much as you think it is.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing here just comes down to your expectation going into it. If you've read a load of bodybuilding magazines, you've seen all these professionals eating 6,000 plus calories a day or whatever, yeah, you're probably in for a bit of a shock. But the main thing really with regards to where your calories are going to be at is going to be determined by your body size or your body weight, the body weight you want to get to. So either whether you maintain close to your checkpoint, whether you want to push that body weight up as an accumulation of muscle and as well as fat as well. But then also a big thing that's going to factor into it is your food choices. If you want to base it predominantly around nutrient-dense food, even if the calories don't look massive on paper, it can still be a larger volume of food. But then on the flip side, if you then do want to start adding in some lower nutrient-dense foods into the added calories that come in, then potentially that volume isn't going to increase as much. So I think expectations are the big one. But really the body weight that you are at your checkpoint, and then building on that, the body weight that you want to hold longer term, are going to be the two main factors that really influence how calories change from checkpoint onwards.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. But yeah, there is this false expectation where you end up on a certain calorie number, and then you think you're going to be eating triple that amount, right, to grow new muscle tissue during your investment phase, when again there is variability between people too. Like we've seen some people where we have to really push their calories up beyond what we initially may think, to be like, oh my god, you really need to start. For you to actually get some sort of growth, you're still not gaining weight at quite a bit of calories, right? And funnily enough, it's usually like the smaller people who sometimes can seem to not get away with, but they seem to just need more food at times. And I've also seen it on the opposite end. I've seen bigger guys who you would think, okay, you probably need like a lot more food to keep growing, to keep gaining muscle mass, but you're actually quite surprised there too. I never know really what to expect, but you won't know until you actually just start adding food back in. You start seeing how they respond, you start seeing how their performance improves in the gym, and then you sort of tailor you'll tailor their calorie intake based on how their body responds. But yeah, for most people, it's not going to be a huge increase in food. And again, it's going to be a very gradual increase as you get heavier and heavier. And fundamentally, remember, it's not about the food per se in an investment phase. It's literally about the performance in the gym and you getting better in the gym. Those are the things that we're going to be tracking. And those are the things we're going to be prioritizing, with food being more as a byproduct to that, or it's a mechanism to fuel your training and fuel your growth, but it's not the thing that is going to make your investment phase. So yeah, It's not going to be a ton of food for most people, but for some it may be. But either way, it shouldn't matter.
What I've seen is the the classics of ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph. That's typically I've found to be quite a good indicator for how much food you tend to go with in muscle building phases, especially if your goal is muscle building. Like the person who's a classical skinny ripped person is probably going to be the person who needs a lot of food to get their weight moving. Whether that's because they're very naturally active, or whether they've just got some crazy metabolism, and that's to be confirmed. But they just tend to have that shared characteristic of the skinny ripped person. It tends to be the person who needs more food, whereas someone who's more endomorphic, quote unquote, gains fat quite easily. Those types of people, maybe slightly broader, maybe trying to say words which don't really seem. I was going to say big boned.
I was thinking, how's he going to say this PC?
Yeah. when people who say big boned, right? But that's sort of they're like, I'm going for. those people probably don't need much food, and they probably like, it's very like just a very small surplus is all they need. I think that's been I've noticed that quite as a big commonality, because those like naturally skinny people, they also need to control their energy expenditure and that they don't do too much, because otherwise they just don't gain anything. You know, that whole, remember you hearing that quote, that classical bodybuilding bulking quote where like, don't run when you can walk, don't walk when you can sit.
Yeah.
Like most people probably shouldn't be living by that quote, but there's a select few that we're probably referring to here where they actually need to control their energy expenditure to allow for a surplus to take place. And they also typically struggle with appetite, so that adds to the issue as well. So yeah, you'll kind of know who you are by just where you come from in that dieting cycle. Like if you're someone that actually needs to lose 25 kilos, you're probably not a naturally skinny person. Whereas if you're someone who just lost, say, 5 to 10 kilos and you're into an incredible shape, then you might be a candidate for that. But ultimately, you just have to go through the journey in order to see where you're at. And see what
that's
your
really
tipping point is.
Yeah, that's very interesting about what you said regarding the skinny ripped dude or the person who just stays skinny. Even if you try to manage their expenditure, like through steps or through cardio, what a lot of them don't realize is just how much they move without knowing. And that's neat, right? And this is where you see in research, you know, especially in like overfeeding studies where they can overfeed people by 1,000 calories every single day and see what happens across a fortnight by just letting them live the way they normally live, not change a variable. And you'll see some people will gain no weight, some people will gain a lot of weight, and some people actually lost weight by overfeeding them 1,000 calories per day. And those would be like the skinny sort of wiry types who are like, well, I didn't do anything different, but you see them, they're like fidgeting all the time, just moving all the time. It's those people, as you said, are the ones who are going to potentially need to really push their calories up beyond what you may think would be their estimate maintenance, right? And we've seen this before. And yeah, you're right. The typical sort of big boned people, let's just say they're more chill. They don't really like to move around too much. They just want to relax, you know, have a nap.
Well, with the wired people, they're the ones that they need to control their stress hormones. They need to actually learn how to chill out. They're probably people that probably won't do well with like intermittent fasting, long periods of fasting, because they just become even more agitated and more wired and more stressed out. They need to learn to chill, right? But their natural tendency is to go the other way.
I think I actually fall into that category quite a bit, because having gone through this cycle a couple of times, I found my NEAT levels naturally drop dramatically when I'm dieting. And then I can really feel the difference when I come back up. And so when food's high, I feel like I'm always kind of doing something, if I've like got chatting, I've got a pen in my hand, or I'm doing something. But I know when I'm like grinding, if I'm just, you know, sitting doing something or watching telly or whatever, I'm literally just like, as I'm like, nothing's moving. My eyes are barely even blinking. You know, like everything I'm doing is just the bare minimum. And so I'm sure that's where, you know, I'm obviously quite adaptive to that, which means when food starts to go up, it has to go quite high. But then on the flip side, if it comes down, I then start to down-regulate things pretty quick as well, it seems.
That's quite interesting, because you said to me the other day that you're eating like 4,400 calories and you're just holding body weight.
Yeah.
Which is, and I actually observed you when we were at the filming, you were quite, not fidgety, but you were moving around a lot. Like when you weren't doing the exercises, you were either hanging off a bar or like lifting some random weight or doing something. And I think you
was getting a pump for the next exercise.
Yeah.
But then if that was in the end of the diet phase, I think I would have just been sat on a bench, just like when you were doing your filming, just sat there, kind of just like head between my legs almost.
And you still had to dig, right? Yeah, you still had to dig during those final phases. So your metabolism adapts both ways.
And I think we spoke about on a previous podcast. I think you were saying there's some research behind it as well, that the people who adapt on one way normally adapt the other way as well. So as much as I might think I can maintain on 4,400, doesn't necessarily mean I'll just drop 500 calories and then get shredded on 3,900, you know?
Exactly. It's a big misconception that.
So you're quite a skinny ripped person. Like, for example, when you're back, if you look at a picture of you 18, are you just like bone and like abs sort of thing?
Well, no, but I my dad is like that 100%, and then my mum would be more of the endomorph kind of thing. So I was kind of always a bit like, where do I go? I was eating a stupid amount of food when I was around 18, and so I wasn't like shredded, but I'm sure if I just ate like, I was having like a couple of liters of milk with my dinner each night, stuff like that, like. So I think if I ate more like quote unquote like normal, I'd probably have been. Would like my brother's much more like that as well, and I think now if I just like say tone back training, ate more intuitively, I would move more towards that kind of look for sure.
What about you, Ivan? Are you a bit more of a meso, ecto?
I was definitely the skinny ripped kid. In my teenage years for sure. I was definitely ecto for sure. Definitely ecto.
What about you, Akash? I know you've said you were kind of the moobs and the pot belly.
Yeah, I think I was more skinny fat, but I definitely wasn't an endomorphic because I was obviously a small frame. So maybe I had the worst of both worlds. I was skinny, but I was also podgy. So I think that's that skinny fat sort of tendency, right? So like my natural reversion is always to like, I'll be slim frame, like small arms, small legs, but I'll have like a podgy belly and podgy chest. So when I bulk and I get too far past the point of diminishing returns, I just look a bigger version of that old self. If that makes sense. So I think I can get away with a decent amount of calories, but probably not. I've got to match my expenditure to hit it. Like I'll have to be very active on a day-to-day basis. Like for example, when I did my heaviest pushes in the past, it was when I was a personal trainer on the gym floor. So my NEAT was generally very, very high. If I try and do that now, I'll just gain too quickly. At the same time, did
you find with higher energy intakes, did you feel more sluggish or did you feel better? Like, did you feel like you could just move around a lot more, or was the amount of food sort of weighing you down?
Yeah, so I don't think I was the more reflexive metabolism on the way up, in that I get more and more energetic. I think there's a point of diminishing returns there as well.
Yeah.
At the same time, when I tried to gain weight when I was younger, I always used to struggle with appetite. I used to struggle with trying to actually get the food in. So it's probably like a mix of the two issues there. So I think the key for me is not to get too fat, and because I know it just all goes through it all goes a bit pear-shaped. At the same time, I need a certain amount of calories in order to grow. Sorry? Yeah, quite literally. Yeah. So yeah, the skinny fat, I think, is an interesting place to be in, because I think with those journeys, people who are skinny fat, I always say to them, the first thing you can do is actually get a little bit leaner. At the same time, you also need to build muscle. So there's that weird paradox of you probably don't need to get as lean as, you probably don't need to get shredded to start a muscle building cycle, but you need to be just a little bit leaner to then build muscle. If you go focus on getting too lean, you'll end up with just nothing. And the reason why you won't look good either is because you just don't have the muscle to show it. I think a lot of people fall into that bracket.
And luckily, if you're just starting your journey in a skinny fat phase, you will get that recomp effect initially.
Yeah.
Where you could probably eat at maintenance, right? But you will drop body fat and build muscle at the same time. Or you can even eat in a slight deficit and get the same result, which is great. So you get the best of both worlds in that initial period.
Yeah. And I think as a general rule, I think getting into a bit of a deficit, drop into body fat is a great way to go about it, because if you come in skinny fat, you probably haven't been training, or at least been training well. So it's going to take you a while to master technique, understand how to push hard in those sets. So while your training is getting up to the quality required to build muscle effectively, you might as well take some body fat off, so you then have just a better starting place for when you can really start pushing on. Otherwise, you can kind of just, if you maintain for a while, you still can progress, but you might as well strip some body fat off while you get the training where it needs to be. Then when training is good, you're also in a lean state, you're in a really good position to really push on with muscle building.
And also, like for skinny fat people, just getting a little bit leaner can help a lot with confidence. And then you feel more confident doing everything. And then it just makes that longer term journey a little bit easier.
Yeah.
I also think with skinny fat people tend to be weak, very weak as well. and not explosive at all. Like, for example, my 100-meter time when I was 16 years old, in the school races, I was 17.3 seconds. Like, there's no power there at all, right? No power or strength. I actually can't believe how slow I was when I look back. So there's just no strength going through those legs. So I think like strength is a massive element for skinny fat people. They're not going to be naturally explosive people, not going to be naturally strong and not naturally muscular. So you have to get really good in probably the 5 to 8 rep range. This is why I've always been obsessed with getting stronger there. And it's that weird thing of going too low in reps and your joints will just get smashed to bits because you haven't got that sort of. If you look at someone who's a classic mesomorph, they've also got like really thick joints. You know, you see those type of people who can do anything and then get away with murder. Skinny fat people probably can't do that. So they probably need to stay like 5 to 8 rep range. And the reason why they shouldn't go too high is because they haven't got the strength output to be able to actually lift decent load. So those have been my sort of findings working with skinny fat people over the years. Just getting them strong is really key and a little bit leaner to begin with. And then you just got to work on that over time. And yeah, you can start rewiring that. I was going to say, what's the
blueprint?
Yeah, that blueprint.
The blueprint.
Yeah. Rewire the blueprint.
It's true though. It can be done.
100%
done all the time. Yeah.
But it may also be that they need more than one traditional cycle of transformation to do that as well.
I think they need like 3 to 4. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean most people do realistically, but it may just be until they feel like they're really looking as they want. They do, that slight fat loss, go into a long investment phase, strip it off. They're going to have a bit more shape then, but then they may need to repeat that several times before they've built that muscle mass up to a point that they're happy with.
Well, if you think about the role of genetics in this, if you're skinny fat, your genetics probably aren't going to be the best for growth either. So you've got to take your time with this and accept longer cycles. So, once you get yourself into a leanish position, you probably need to be in a small surplus for 2.5, 3 years, and then tidy up and then repeat that probably 3 to 4 times. And when you add those years up, it ends up being about 10 years, which is probably the length of time it takes to actually build a physique and build enough muscle. So you don't actually call yourself skinny fat anymore, or see yourself as skinny fat anymore.
And also with that, I don't think that surplus needs to be too aggressive at all.
No.
As well, especially if you're coming from skinny fat. I think you could definitely get away with just a slight average surplus over that long investment period. That would definitely be the way to go. What do you guys think now, knowing what we know now, like the dreamer bulks? Because I know AV, you pushed the dreamer bulk. I know you probably learned a lot through that as well. But what do you think many people should undertake that approach? What population?
To clarify what you mean by that, do you mean going super heavy in terms of body weight, or do you mean eating just crap?
Oh, well, I guess you're going super, intentionally getting like super heavy. Yeah. But I guess the two would go hand in hand, right? Where you just eat crap as well. You don't have to, but it usually goes together. Yeah.
I look back and I think, would I have done that again? And the reality is, I was at my absolute strongest when I was not probably at the absolute top, but close to it. My highest I've ever been is 91 kilos. My absolute strongest I've ever been is 87 kilos. And I've set all my all-time PRs there. And I spent a lot of time between 84 and 87. And that's where I found like my real, like in terms of strength gain, probably didn't look as pretty, but 84 to 87 was strength-wise was really, really productive. And I haven't been able to match that strength. I can see myself getting there over time, but I'm nowhere near that where I was in that period. When I compare that to like 78, it's just not the same. So I think if I didn't go there, I wouldn't have developed the strength and the associated muscle mass to then be able to look good leaner at a leaner body weight.
Yeah. And in retrospect though, looking at it, thinking of it now, you got heavy for you, but I would say compared to what other people do for these like massive bulks, I still think yours was quite well controlled.
Yeah.
You didn't go like 9,500 kilos, because I think that would obviously have been very excessive. Because if you're sort of hanging around 78 now,
90,
so it's like a 10 kilo gain, right?
Well, once I got to 88, like trying to get to 90, I was like, one of the things I just want to see on scale. I just want to see 90 on the scale. But it was getting to the point where I was trying to have like 2-3 cheat meals a night, not a night, a week, just to get the calories in. I just couldn't get the appetite to get the calories required, and that was the hardest bit. So I don't even know if I could get to 9,500 because I was trying to do it with like 80% quality food. I think you just have to go to absolute shit food to get there, and then you just feel horrible as well.
Yeah, it's crazy effort. I don't know how some of those like heavy guys do it, man. Like every day, like 8,000-9,000 calories every day. Like insane.
Also, just to like talk about the skinny fat thing, it's not just applicable to guys. I think women get these sort of prototypes or apply to women just as much. You know, you get the woman who's naturally skinny, naturally always very lean, but they also tend to be naturally very intuitive to the food, naturally very fidgety people. And then at the same time, you get the skinny fat women, and you get the more sort of endomorphic types. So it applies across the board.
For sure.
That's why some women we got some people who we have in R&T who they're in investment phases and they're eating 2,500-3,000 calories, and they're staying relatively lean. Whereas other women going above 1,600 to 1,800 is probably going to be a disaster for them because they'll just gain too much body fat after that. And there's nothing wrong.
But I would say that. No. And I would say that just because the 2 calorie intakes are vastly different, I'm sure both females feel the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So she doesn't, it's not like one is eating 1,800 calories and feels like they're starving, you know, or that could just be enough for them for their energy requirements and for them to gain muscle and feel good. You know, so just because someone is, I think this goes across the board because people think, oh, that person is eating 4,000 calories a day and staying at X amount of body fat, that lean, he must be, that must be awesome. But it's like, well, no, at the end of the day, that person is still that lean. Being lean in of itself is what causes the suffering, not the actual total calories. Do you know what I mean? So just because someone is eating 4,000 calories and staying at like 5% body fat doesn't mean that they feel any different to someone who's eating 2,000 calories but staying at 5% body fat. They still feel the same. One is just able to eat more because they're probably expending more. You know, like
I tried to crack that once. Remember when I think it was in 2019 after my last diet, I was thinking, all right, let me play the food game. And I think I got it up to like 3.2. And I was thinking, I'm 3,200 calories and I'm shredded to the bone, but I feel horrible. I just learned then.
Yeah.
Even now, like when I've lost a few pounds recently and I noticed I noticed like each kilo brings a different feeling. I was thinking, I haven't changed my food at all, but I noticed the difference. Feeding at 77 is different to 79. Just because, and the calorie intake is exactly the same. It's just how you feel when you're at certain body fat percentages.
Exactly. So I think that's a good point for people to know. It's not that, oh, that person is eating that much food, they must feel great. It's like, well, no, it's how you feel at a certain calorie level that dictates everything. You know, we get some people who feel fantastic on 1,500 calories. Appetite's good, energy levels are good, you know, hormones are all good. And it's like, okay, you sure? They're like, feeling great. You know, so it's extremely variable from person to person, and again, it's going to be based on body weight too. But I think people get caught up in that total calorie number. You know,
because if you are a relatively small person, you train 3 times a week, your steps are relatively low, your office space, so you're sitting down a lot of the day. Your expenditure is probably not going to be that high. So although 1,500, 1,800, 2,000, whatever, might not seem like a massive number, if you're not expending much, you know, you've got to balance that out somewhere, haven't you?
Yeah, very true.
Kind of segues onto another question is like, do you need to be 100% on all the time with regards to when you're in an investment phase? Let's say 100% is when you're in the final 4 weeks before a checkpoint. You know, you're deep in the grind, you're pushing things all guns blazing. Do you need to be on that same applied intensity for the rest of your life, or in an investment phase to get the same sort of results?
Yeah, if you don't want it enough, man. You got to grind your whole life. You know, what's wrong with you? No, definitely not.
I mean, I think in my own personal experience on this is like, if in an investment phase, if you are 100%, the stress it takes to be at 100% causes more harm than it is good. I think 100% is when you're in that final few stages towards checkpoint. If you try and apply that same mentality throughout the whole year and in an investment phase, just stress yourself out over everything. And all that accumulated stress is going to do you more harm than good. So what I've realized is like for years, I tried to be as militant as possible. You know, I've done shit like taking Tupperwares to a restaurant or whenever, you know, and then you're emptying it on the plate. You know, all these things are just stupid when you look back at it. Because I thought I need to be like 100% all the time. And then I realized if I just let go of it and you just naturally go with it, just make good choices and just go with it, you end up making better progress in the gym as well, because you're not as militant with like, I've got to hit this session at this time at this day. It's like, okay, well, no, today's not going to be a good day. I'll do it tomorrow instead. Like these little small tweaks, it makes such a difference for me personally, with my longevity in this as well, in keeping it interesting, keeping it exciting, and just not getting bogged down by the idea that it's got to be this stressful sort of endeavor.
Once you understand the big rocks and what you need to hit and what actually matters, you can pull back on so many unnecessary minute details that just don't accumulate to anything. But again, back then you wouldn't have known that. You would have thought, no, it has to be the chicken breast that I've cooked at home with my seasoning, with my salt and pepper. I cannot have the chicken breast at the restaurant. Otherwise, my deadlift tomorrow may suffer. You don't know those things, right? And yeah, I think we've all been in that phase where we just try to maximize every single variable. And yeah, you look back and go, damn, what the heck was that for? And I think what you made a really good point there was taking your training seriously, right? But not getting so attached to the point where you're getting anxiety the night before, you can't sleep, you're having nightmares about the squat rack. Like, you don't want that. And again, funnily enough, gains seem to come better when, I think, Ed, I've heard you speak about this too. When you took the training off a pedestal and you brought it back down to earth, and you didn't think of your session until you just started warming up and went to the gym, you actually found that your performance was that much better because it wasn't engulfing your entire life. You know, so I think there's a lot of merit to that.
Yeah, no, 100%.
There was a time when I was trying to chase 120 kilo bench press, right? So it's not like world record standard. It was good for me. And there was a period where for about 6 to 8 weeks where every night before bed, you know, I'd lie in bed and I'd visualize the bar the next day. This is Sunday night, so Monday's bench day. I'd visualize the bench press. I'd pretend I'm holding the bar in my bed like this. And I'd like lower myself to the floor. I'd close my eyes and think of myself pushing the tomorrow's like 110 3 sets for 3 or whatever it was. And I was just so like obsessed with this whole routine. And for about 24 hours straight, all I was thinking about was the bench press. Like I got to what I wanted to get to, but it was so much of a routine to keep up that I just stressed myself out over it.
Yeah.
That wasn't long. I couldn't keep that up for too long.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because for me, you know, the Iron Cross is something that I've been wanting for a very, very long time. And I'm catching myself recently because I'm seeing like really good progress. And I catch myself like I'll go for a few walks and I'll literally be doing like Iron Crosses when I'm walking, just like, you know, or like, you know, just working on my form or again, getting into that weird place. And then I'll have to like check myself and go, what are you doing, dude? Like, this is not the way for you to sort of get your goal. Because I've noticed in the past when a goal like engulfs me in that way, yeah, it's motivating and it's driving you, but it can also be a huge distraction from other things in life. And you don't want that. You know, yes, you want your goals to be serious and you want them to be, you know, part of your life, but you don't want them to be your life. Because I think that's when you start running into issues like, you know, the whole anxiety stuff, having nightmares, snapping your elbow, you know, like it's not fun, man.
Well, it's because you start just fantasizing about the future all day long, right? You spend all day long thinking about the future. You don't actually you don't enjoy that process.
The outcome. Yeah, you think of the outcome and you lose track of the journey.
Yeah. I think it's the same as putting a photo shoot on a pedestal, I think, because you think, all right, I would really want to hit 120 as a bench press. Like, that's a good goal and, you know, to give you some direction. But one day you bench 117 and a half. The next week you might say get 120, but nothing else in your life changed. Not like more people are going to like you. You're not like going to have more money in your bank account. Like, you're not going to be actually happier. Like, it's good to give you direction, but it's the same as the photo shoot. The day after the shoot, you haven't got this perfect life. everything's really the same. You've ticked off that milestone, which is brilliant, but you just recalibrate and kind of go again from there, don't you?
Funny thing is, after I hit that 120 kilo bench press, a couple months later, I hurt my shoulder so bad. I've not been able to bench since. So
I'm actually exactly the same. I hit 120 and then just couldn't bench again.
Couldn't get over it, yeah. And I got to 120 on the floor, and then again, shortly after that, I hurt myself. So yeah, that's why like it's just not worth doing the 1, 2, 3 reps sets, unless it's definitely a fine line.
I think
go on.
I think there's great merit in having something to strive for. I think we've always discussed this,
100%.
right? Like we love that. We love that chase of a certain goal, and what you need to do to achieve a certain goal. That's where the beauty lies. You know what I mean? That's where the fun lies. The actual outcome is always very underwhelming in comparison to what you thought it would be. That's just life, though.
Yeah.
And it's always the case with anything. But
that's what all high performers go through, right? They'll obsess over getting to the top of the mountain. Get to the top of the mountain. It's like, well, that's cool. What's the next one? I think Mike Tyson talks about it a lot, doesn't he? And that's why he struggles so much with dealing with the success he had. He accumulated all those millions and he gambled it all away, and then he just never knew what to do with it when he got to a certain point.
Yeah, same as who's the guy that landed on the moon? Is it Neil Armstrong?
Yeah. Is
that right? Yeah. When he came back, obviously, that was the pinnacle of his life. Like, I got to the moon. Oh, what else do I do now? And he spiraled into like severe alcoholism, and I think he also got into gambling, and he was always looking for that next fix. And he had a lot of issues after coming back from the moon. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's a whole different rabbit hole there. Like, regards to like high performance mindsets, and like what people do to get to their goals, and then how.
I think the message with those targets though is to set them to give you direction, and do what's required to hit them, but don't stress about rushing over, like getting it this week as opposed to next week. If it's just like a bench press PR or something like that, it's not gonna change anything in the long term. Like, it's a long-term journey, and I think getting too obsessed with trying to rush it or get to these targets is what often results in people adding weight when they shouldn't. And so either letting form drop, so like cutting the range of motion is a really common one, or potentially even just like putting themselves in increased risk of injury, because it's like, oh, I got 5 on this last week. If your rep range is 5 to 7, instead of staying at that weight and getting up to 7 reps, they're like, all right, I'm gonna go straight on to the next one. And it's like, next thing I know, they're doing like triples or doubles, or to
with half the range.
Or to keep hitting hitting the numbers in logbook. Range of motion's cut in half. And then that might not even be an issue right there and then, or display itself as an issue. 2 weeks down the line, you've added a bit more weight, then plateaued. You don't have to do a reset, strip everything back. You haven't really done anything in the last month anyway, because you've just been doing little partial reps. You have to reset it to about 10 kilos before that anyway, then build back up. And it's like a 3-month process, just because you couldn't just, like add 2.5 kilos and then go from there, or do you know what I mean?
Relate to that so much. I've done that so many times where you're meant to be doing minimum 5 reps, and you're like, you know what, that was a good 5 next week. Let me bump it up. And you end up just doing 4, and then you think the following week you think, well, that was a good 4. Let me just go up again. Then you're doing 3s, and it's just then you hurt yourself. I think there's also a lot of merit. What people who are building muscle, especially, don't realize is there's a difference between doing 50 kilo presses once in your life and doing 50 kilo presses for a whole year. Like, there's a significant difference in how you look as well. If you're someone who can do them every single week versus the first time you ever do it. So don't think that you have to always put that extra weight on the bar. And for example, if you stick with the weight for a long period of time, even if you get the same rate and reps each week, it's not necessarily negative progress. You probably should look at something at some point, but at the same time, you've pressed that weight, a new weight, for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, your physique will improve as a result of it. And you'll have better stability, you'll have better control of the weight, and all these sorts of things. So don't underestimate the difference between pressing a new weight or pulling a new weight once and doing it 10, 20, 50 times.
Mm-hmm. I would even bet to say, I've not ever seen this done, but theoretically, if you take let's say your 5 RM now for squats and RDLs, and you stick with that same weight for the entire year, and you get your 5 RM up to like a 15 RM across that whole year, you're going to be bigger. You're going to have a lot bigger legs and hamstrings, or lot bigger quads and hamstrings and glutes. And you've literally used the same weight the entire year, but you've just added a single rep here and there when you could. And you would, in my opinion, be much bigger in a year without even adjusting the weight, but only because you managed to turn your 5 RM into a 15 or 20 RM. The legs are going to grow. They're going to respond. It's just not very fun for most people.
Well, that was, I don't know if do you remember like Doug Hepburn and a lot of the old school strongmans, a lot of the old school strongman techniques from the 50s, 60s, even earlier. Doug Hepburn, Hackenschmidt, all these guys, they all did similar sorts of things where they'd pick a weight and they do 8 sets of 2 to 4, and they'd literally be 8 sets of 2 would be the start. Then they'd go 8 sets. First set would be 3, and the rest would be 2. Then they go 3, and then literally just add a rep. And by the time they
go
all the way around and actually add weight, it's like 14 to 16 weeks later. And all they do is they add 2 kilos, and then they continue the cycle. And it's called like, I can't remember what they used to call it, but it's like long-term double progression or the boring method of training, whatever it is. But
it's effective.
A lot of the strongest people in the world have trained like this, and it's one of the best ways to stay safe as well. If you're someone that always gets niggles, it's a really good way to get strong and safe.
Yeah, I literally think for most people who are training for muscle growth, you stay in the 8 to 12 rep range and you do double progression forever, you will continue making gains without having to overcomplicate it. This is, of course, saying if you don't get bored of it and you enjoy that way of training, but you could literally make progress for decades in that way, in my opinion, because you're not the gains aren't like an extra load the next week. The gains could literally be 1 extra rep across 4 sets. You know what I mean? It's so minute, but over the long term, it really adds up. It's a great way to do it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
And just to cycle it back to what we were talking about before, especially for the skinny fat, the skinny fat people with tiny little wrists and tiny little joints who always get injured and niggles. There are people that just tend to get more injured more often and they get niggles more often. For those people, I think it's an absolute game changer. So long as you can change your mindset to see why it is beneficial.
Yeah, because again, many people don't see, I only added a rep across 3 sets. They don't see that as progress. They don't count it as progress unless it's like 5 kilos on the bar extra. Yeah. It's like, no, it's not how it works. That's that quick fix mentality.
Yeah, I was saying this to someone the other day though, because if you actually think you just start training, and you probably will get a faster rate of progress initially, but if you just keep being able to add weight every session, you'd be like, if you've been training for 10 years, we'd be curling like 200 kilos, wouldn't we? Like no one does that. So oh yeah, I mean like the backup sets anyway. But like, but no one's doing those things. So like that's where you got to kind of think, okay, like these people have been doing it for like 10 years. They're lifting some impressive weight, but between you and them and like 9.5 years of progress, that's not 5 kilos every session. You know what I mean? That's a rep here, 2.5 kilos there. Repeat.
I think what's always humbling for people, and when they finally get this, is when they get hurt. When you get hurt a few times, you change the whole way you change the entire way you train, and you start thinking, oh shit, that's what that does. Until then, we can talk all day long, but that method usually leads to getting hurt, doesn't it? Until you get hurt, you'll never realize just how important it is to go slow on this.
And the value of form, because I think despite us beating the drum continuously on this, people still seem to view it's either I implement progressive overload or I focus on form. And so it's like, I'll focus on form and they just use pink dumbbells and barely, don't do any work. Or they go, oh, actually, no, today I'm going to focus on progressing. And then the form just goes completely out the window. Like your form just has to be a non-negotiable. And again, like you just said, Akash, people don't really get it until they get hurt or just realize that they're not making any progress. But implementing progressive overload, but cutting your depth on a bench press by half, it's not progressive overload, and you end up just wasting your time.
Yeah, and when you think about it, progressive overload and technique, they're one of the same. You can't have you don't have one without the other. And progressive overload is usually always a demonstration of what you can do. You know what I mean? It's a signal. It's a sign that you have improved. You know, you don't have to lift an extra 2.5 kilos the following week to progressively overload. The fact that you can do it means that you have progressively overloaded. But we're getting into the weeds here. But the point is that you shouldn't disconnect form with progressive overload, because for that overload to occur, your form must stay consistent. If your form changes, how do you know you actually got stronger or better? You just leveraged your body in a way that made the weight feel lighter, but it didn't actually stimulate the muscles in the way that you wanted them to be stimulated. And again, this is why we encourage video recordings and constant feedback and constant critiquing, because we've all done this, boys. You know, we've all filmed ourselves going, oh, well, that's not right. and then we got to reset it. But if you continue, if you're always on top of your filming and you're always on top of seeing your top sets, then you know that things are moving in the right direction. And that's good to know. If there's one bit of advice I would give for people is to record just your top sets only for your 3 to 4 main key lifts. Record them over time and then see how your logbook matches up with that. And that would be the best way for you to honestly tell if you're progressing or not.
That's a wrap. Invest heavy, invest hard, and invest long term. Play the long game. Yeah. Don't cash out when the market starts dipping.
That's it.